Come hither, young quagmire. Okay. So I didn't do an August wrap-up because I was too busy doing this. So today's video is going to be my August and September wrap-up. I have technically 22 things to talk about with you today, but I've kind of split them up into groups. If you want to hear about a specific book or a specific group of books, I have timestamps down below so that you can easily navigate through this video. I'm hoping that it's not going to be too long because I just filmed my Brizinger review and my jaw is tired. We have TMJ problems around here. Okay, first of all, I want to start with some stats. I read 22 things within the months of August and September. All of those books amounted to 8,087 pages, which is an average of 132 pages per day, which I don't think is too shabby. In terms of star rating, I didn't break them down into specific stars, but I took like an average of all of them. My average for the months of August and September was a 3.989. So without further ado, let's just get right into the books that I read. Okay, so the first group that we're going to talk about is the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I wrapped up this series in August. I read book 3, Ruin, and book 4, Wrath. I didn't want to get it off the shelf. These books are massive. Anyway, this series has quickly become one of my favorite series of all time. I love the way that John Gwynne wrapped up this series. Book 3 is actually my favorite in the series, which I think is funny because usually when I see people talking about this series, book 4 is always their favorite. Book 3 was actually my favorite. It's a very classic feeling fantasy, but with a modern twist. And I feel like John Gwynne takes a lot of those kind of classic fantasy tropes that we all know and love. The prophecy, the chosen one, the good versus evil, and he kind of flips them a little bit and gives it a different sort of spin, which I really, really like. I do have a full spoiler-free video on The Faithful and the Fallen if you want to know my more in-depth thoughts and why you should read it. I'll have that linked down below in the description and upstairs in the cards. I would absolutely recommend these books to literally any fantasy fan if you're wanting to get into something that is really comfortable, if you're familiar with the classic fantasy tropes, but with some great character development, great animal companions, fantastic plot, and some twists and turns that you may expect, but won't expect how they're done. Next, we have the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. I read the first 5 books in this series in August. These are novella-length portal fantasy books following this group of children who have gone to these other worlds and they found their home at these other worlds, and for whatever reason, they've been sent back to our world and they are struggling to deal with it. So their families send them to this school called, not Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I can't remember exactly what the school's called. Anyway, they send them to this school to kind of help rehabilitate them. The odd-numbered books follow this group of children at this school, and then the even-numbered books are kind of like the origin stories of specific children. This is a very whimsical series, and it's a little bit dark, but I do have to say that I don't think that this series is entirely for me. Book 1 is like a murder mystery. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I also thought that we were following the most boring character out of the entire cast of characters, so that kind of dampened my enjoyment of it, but I did still think it was a fun idea. I enjoyed my time reading this book. Book 2 is my favorite of the ones that I've read. This is following Jack and Jill in the Moors. The Moors is kind of like a mix between Dracula and Frankenstein. There are these two ruling parties. One is a mad scientist and the other one is obviously a vampire, and these twin sisters, Jack and Jill, are, going on this adventure in the Moors. One of them ends up with the vampire, one of them ends up with the mad scientist, and you get to see how their personalities and character builds to the point that we see them in book 1. Book 3 is following the cast of characters again and again. I don't like the character that we're following. We're following mainly this girl named Cora, and Cora is so annoying. She is a plus-sized character, and that is not the reason that I do not like her. The reason that I don't like her is because she makes the fact that she's plus-sized everyone else's problem. She projects her insecurities on everyone else. There's multiple different instances within this story that she's like, oh, well, you think that because I'm fat, right? Or you don't like me because I'm fat, right? And the other characters are like, what? No, that makes no sense. She's that type of character. She's just very annoying and very irritating, and I just didn't like her. I also didn't like the story in general. I felt like there were a lot of plot conveniences. In this one, we go to multiple different worlds, but we are sent on this quest to kind of resurrect one of the characters that dies in book 1 so that she can go on to have have her daughter, and I like that premise, but I didn't really like the execution of it. Book number 4 was another win for me and the series. In this one, we are going to the Goblin Market, which is a lot of fun. In the Goblin Market, there is a fair price for everything, and it's up to you and the person that you're bartering with to kind of discover what that fair price is. And if you go into debt in the Goblin Market, it has physical ramifications. We're following a girl named Lundy in this. She goes to the Goblin Market and we follow her adventure there. I really liked this one. I loved the Goblin Market. It's a very atmospheric world, and I love the concept of fair value in this. I felt like it was really interesting. And I also really liked that even though this is not a monetary centered world, it's really focused on bartering, debt is still something that you can get into, and it has physical ramifications, and it physically changes the way that you look and the way that you think. Book number 5 was interesting for me because we're again following Jack and Jill, but we are following them after the events of book 1. So in book 2, we hopped backwards from book 1, and in book 5, we hop forwards from book 1. So where I really loved Jack and Jill in book 2, I didn't love them as much in book 5. I think in this one I had kind of like a mix between positives and negatives. One of the positives was Jack and Jill, but again, we're following Cora. Again, I don't like Cora. She gets on my nerves. I just wanted her to just find her door so that she could just fucking leave the story. I just didn't like her at all. One thing that I noticed in this one that I didn't notice at all in the other books is that the air is constantly smelling like ozone. What does ozone even smell like? And how did these kids identify the fact that the air did in fact smell like ozone? I don't understand. I don't get it. Okay. The next group is the Inheritance Cycle. I read books 1 through 3 in the Inheritance Cycle between the months of August and September. I have a dedicated spoiler-free review of each of these books on my channel. I will have that playlist listed, linked somewhere so that you can find it if you're interested. I didn't read these as a kid. I have no nostalgic ties to them, and I was wanting to see if they held up well as an adult. And so far, I've had a little bit of a mixed bag, okay? Aragon was good, but it wasn't great. I really liked the beginning of it, and then we went on a really long stretch of just travel, journey, and the world building was a little bit heavy-handed during that travel journey, and then at the end, we really picked up the pace, so I was like really excited for book 2, right? Book 2 has been my favorite of the series so far. I really liked it. I feel like Aragon had a lot of character development in this. Our world was expanded a lot. We learned a lot about the different political forces that are at play in here. We got some training montage, which I really loved. We got to learn a little bit more about the relationship between Aragon and his dragon, Saphira. There's just a lot more characters, a lot more details in book 2, and I really liked book 2. Book 3 fell extremely flat for me, and my review of book 3 is going up this Sunday, so if you're interested to hear more of my in-depth thoughts, definitely check that one out. Just an overview, I'm very conflicted about book 3 because I think some of the best moments of the series so far were in book 3, but also Paulini's weaknesses were so prevalent in book 3. The pacing was off, it was extremely bloated, and I had a lot of issues with just my general enjoyment of book 3. So like I said, review is going to be up on Sunday if you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Next, we have a wild card. I read Animal Farm. Why did I read Animal Farm, you may ask? Well, because I have discovered the art of listening to audiobooks at work, and because I decided to kind of put the Wayward Children series down, I picked up the next thing that popped up, which was Animal Farm, which was very strange. I had never read this one. I know that a lot of people read this in school, but I had personally never read it. I really liked it. I really enjoyed myself. On the surface, this book is about a group of farm animals that get sick and tired of being lorded over by the farmer. He's not really doing his job. He's kind of a drunk. They're tired of it, so they take over. They take over the farm and they start to build their own society, and you see the ramifications of that coup, I guess. This was surprisingly dark. I knew it was going to be a little bit dark, but I was not expecting it to have so much betrayal and manipulation and propaganda and subjugation and tyranny hiding behind the facade of farm animals building their own society, okay? This book was sad, it was disturbing, and it had a frighteningly cyclical pattern that just made my stomach drop when I got to that point. It was just very interesting, and it was an interesting experience having read it for enjoyment rather than reading it for class. I think I probably would have been bored if I was reading it for class, but I did listen to the audiobook of this one, and I really ended up enjoying it. Next, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This one I was really excited about. I had this one hyped so much in my head, and I feel like that was to its detriment. This is about a woman named Emily Wilde. She is a scholar and she is journeying to this really remote northern village called Liosland. Probably didn't pronounce that right, but it doesn't matter. She's going to the north to study fairies, okay? She's going to the north to study fairies because she's putting together this encyclopedia of fairies that are known to man. And this is one of the final places that she has to go. This is written in a journal format. Each one of the chapters are an entry from Emily Wilde's journey as she's learning more about the fairies around her. I felt like the first half of this was really, really whimsical. It was giving me huge Spiderwick vibes. If you have watched the Spiderwick Chronicles or have read the Spiderwick Chronicles, this is like if you were following Arthur Spiderwick as he is creating the field guide, okay? It's very, very good at the beginning. However, the plot kind of took a little bit of a turn and I didn't really like where it went. There is a romance that happens in here, but I feel like it was so underdeveloped that I really just didn't care. I also didn't 100% jive with the way that the plot went. I would have been 100% happy just watching Emily Wilde interact with the smaller fae folk and learning more about the culture of the fae, but the way that the plot went, she just got like a little bit too involved for my taste. Also, I feel like some of the choices that Emily makes throughout this are vastly different from the amount of knowledge and experience that she continuously reminds the reader that she has. For someone who's writing the first encyclopedia of fairies and who apparently has all of this experience dealing with the fairies, she's very unobservant. She's also very impulsive and a little dumb at times, which I just didn't really love. So I liked this book, but I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Next is one that I'm so excited to talk about. I gave a little bit of a hint of this in my October TBR, but I was planning on reading Red Rising in September, and I did. This book has been on my shelf for years. I've owned the first 2 books for years, and I've just never picked them up. I finally picked them up in September, and I loved it, okay? So Red Rising is a sci-fi novel, and we're set in this world where humanity is kind of differentiated by colors. So you have like golds at the top who are ruling and reds at the bottom who are like the grunt workers. They're kind of like glorified slaves, if you will. And our main character is Darrow. He's 16. He's just gotten married. He's living the dream. But when he experiences a horrible loss in his life, he is forced to take a look at the world around him and examine the truths that he has previously accepted through a new lens. And he's thrown into this insane world. I'm planning on doing a why you should read video on the Red Rising trilogy, but I did read all 3 of these books in September. They are fabulous, okay? Red Rising is kind of like a battle royale story with some sci-fi elements. So if you're wanting to get into the kind of sci-fi scene, but you're normally reading a lot of fantasy, this is very fantasy adjacent, I would say. I loved the questions about humanity in this series. I loved that this world is very reminiscent of our own. I do have to say that some of the things that Darrow says and does and his motivations can be a little bit cliche, but I really loved it. I loved book 1. Book 2 was a little bit more difficult for me to get into because there is a time jump from the end of book 1 into book 2, and it's more of like a space opera-esque story. So because I'm new to sci-fi, it was a little bit more difficult for me to follow the epic ship battles that were going on. But book 3 had me bawling from page 1 to page whatever the fuck it ends on. I loved it. The emotional impact of that book is like an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. It was insane, incredible. I loved it. If you enjoy classics like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, this is very reminiscent of that, but in like a sci-fi setting. It's full of propaganda, manipulation, betrayals, plotting, planning, and just rebellion. It's so good. I'm obsessed with this series. Like I said, I am planning on doing a dedicated review for the first 3 books in this saga, and I'm so excited about it. I'm planning it right now. It's probably gonna come up next week. I don't know, but it's so good. And the last 2 things that I want to talk about is my mangas. So if you don't like manga, that's totally fine. You can click out of this video. I love you so much. Bye. I'm still on my One Piece journey. In August and September, I read volumes 5 through 9. At this point in the series, it is a good series, but I'm waiting for it to be a great series, a series that warrants the amount of love and obsession that people have for this series. I'm waiting for it. I love watching Luffy and the crew go on all of these adventures, but I do feel like it's getting a little bit repetitive. You know, we show up at this village, these villagers need help, we help the villagers and defeat the enemy. Now we go to the next village and these villagers need help and we help them defeat the enemy. And so on and so forth. It's just getting a little bit repetitive at this point, so I'm hoping that this series will kind of expand a little bit. I'm so down for helping the villagers. I'm so down for defeating the enemy. But when it is continuously, this is the story, it kind of gets a little bit repetitive and predictable. So I'm hoping that the story will expand a little bit. I'm hoping that the world will expand a little bit. I am really enjoying watching the relationships within the Straw Hat crew kind of meld together. And the most recent volume that I read, I am getting that feeling that they're starting to meld together and just become this unstoppable force, which I'm so excited about. Zoro is still my favorite, I think, but I'm loving Usopp as well. I love his character. I think he is kind of like the comedic relief, kind of like the bumbling fool, but I really love him. I think he's so fun. He's so charming and sweet, and I love him so much. Luffy is also fantastic. I love his attitude, his positive attitude towards literally everything. I enjoy it while I read it, but when I put it down, it's very easy to not pick back up. So I'm hoping that I will get to the point where I'm just like, this is the best thing of all time, like everybody else is, but we shall see. We shall see. And the last thing that I need to talk about is Vinland Saga. I read books 2 and 3 of Vinland Saga in August and September, and I'm continuously loving this book. This is a very historical type of manga, and it's also very violent. I've said a little bit about it. It's like a revenge kind of story, but we are following Thorfinn, and he's joined up with these Vikings who are a part of the group that is invading England. I love the art in this. I love the story so far. The only thing that I want a little bit more of is I'm feeling like Thorfinn is a little bit of a one-note character. He's very driven towards revenge. He's very angry. However, the people that are surrounding him are very, very, very well written. Askeladd is one of my favorite characters in this. He is like one of the enemies, but I really, really love him. Thorkel, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he is like this beast of a man. He rampages through the world, and he's just loves battle. He thrives in battle. He just thirsts for blood, and I love him so much. I also really like the Prince Canute. I love his character as well, and I'm really enjoying the way that this story is going. A lot of war, a lot of politics, a lot of betrayals, a lot of death and blood and gore. The art is fantastic. Some of these panels in here are just so beautiful, and some of them are just so gruesome, and I love them so much. So I am really enjoying this as well, and I'm eager to get into book 4 in October, which is exciting. So those are all of the books that I read in the months of August and September. I will not be doing this again because my jaw is killing me from talking so long. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you thought of them. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you have not already. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.